Hi folks, I was starting to put a talk together for next year's syllabus, but in light of our current lockdown and knowing how much some of you love your Scottish trips, I thought I would convert it into a series of weekly videos. Basically, it's my journey on foot, by car and on a bike over more years than I can remember. The journey starts on the Mull of Kintyre and travels up the west coast, taking in many of the Hebridean islands. Arran and the islands of the Clyde have been omitted as they are not truly on the west coast in my opinion, and Tiree and Rum because I have yet to visit them. Okay, off we go. Island number 1, and this is Davar Island at the mouth of Campbelltown Loch. Ailsa Craig, a few kilometres away across the Firth of Clyde, is also a very similar shape. The island is reached by a tidal causeway with a good track running along its shore to Davar Lighthouse. Also on the island is a cave, on the walls of which is the painting of a crucifix. Discovered in 1887 by a fisherman who pronounced it a miracle. It turned out, however, to be done by a local artist. The painting has been touched up over the years and is still in good condition. This next picture was taken 10 minutes later and shows just how changeable the weather can be on the west coast. All 4 seasons possible in one day. Looking back over Campbelltown Loch from Campbelltown itself, Davar Island in the distance. Campbelltown, formerly known as Kinloch Kilkerran, was once one of Scotland's more affluent towns, an important fishing port because of its sheltered harbour. When I worked for wire trawlers back in the 1960s, boats returning from Iceland would often take shelter here. The other, perhaps bigger reason for its importance was its whisky production. The town is still categorised as one of the 6 big whisky producing areas alongside Speyside and Islay, etc. At one point there were 30 distilleries in the town. Sadly only 3 remain. I've included this next shot of the harbour just to show how wealthy the town was. Note the size of some of the houses on the far side of the harbour. A few miles north of Campbelltown along the A83 brings us to Tainlone and the Calmac ferry services for Gear. Here the ferry is unloading at Ardminish, the island's main settlement. Gear is 6 miles long and 1.5 miles wide with only 98 inhabitants. The island is nearly entirely given over to agriculture. One of its former owners was Sir John Horlicks of malted drink fame, who bought Ackmore House on the island in 1944, living there until his death in 1972. The gardens he created are now owned by the Heritage Trust and open to the public. In 2002, the islanders bought Gear for the sum of £4 million, partly funded by National Lottery. Here we are looking across westward towards Islay from the climb up to Craigbarn, the island's highest point. Just in front of the far buildings are the remains of a water wheel, with its large external wheels still intact. Looking north from the summit of Craigbarn towards Jura, Knapdale and the Isle of Mull. There will be quite a few shots taken from the summits of Hebridean Islands as we travel northward. Carrying on northward along the A82 to Kennecraig, where a narrow one-track road leads over to the east coast of Kintyre and the Isle of Arran ferry terminal at Clonaigue. Nearby is Skipness Castle. Built in the 13th century by Clan MacSween, in 1494 it was garrisoned by royal troops before passing into Campbell hands. The castle was abandoned in the 17th century, but remains in good condition. Unusually, entry to both castle and car park are free. A few hundred yards up the coast from the castle are the ruins of the medieval Kilbrannan Chapel, also known as Skipness or St Brandon's Chapel. Note the cannonballs in the foreground. Another of Skipness's attractions is its seafood cabin. Highly recommended. Seafood is something the whole west coast of Scotland is famous for. Pity that most of the best stuff seems to go abroad. Retracing our steps back to Kennecraig, which is another of Calmac's ferry terminals, this time the destination is to Islay and Jura. Twice daily ferries leave here for Islay. The morning sailing to the tiny port of Askeig takes 2 hours 20 minutes. Unloading here is directly onto the main street, as seen in this shot taken a couple of years ago. The island can also be reached by regular flights from Glasgow to Port Ellen. Prince Charles famously crash-landed here in 1995. Islay, nicknamed the Queen of the Isles, is the 5th largest of Scotland's islands, 25 miles long by 15 miles wide, with a population of over 3,000. Mainstays of its economy are agriculture, tourism and distilling. The island is rich in history, once being the seat of the Lord of the Isles. It is also a centre for bird watching with over 100 resident species, including the hen harrier, golden eagle and chough. Islay, however, has yet another nickname, the Whisky Isle, with its 9 active distilleries. 2 new ones planned to open this year and 2 more in the pipeline. This one is Bunnahabhain, which translates as mouth of the river. Its distillery, seen here on the Sound of Jura, opened in 1880 and has been in production ever since. When distilleries became mostly automated, many of the workers became redundant and the cottages built for them became empty. Converted into holiday cottages, we stayed at the very end one a couple of times back in the 1980s. Rouval Lighthouse is the most northerly point on Islay and is reached by a coastal path from Bunnahabhain, a 9-mile round trip. With the lighthouse also being fully automated, the old keeper's accommodation is now let, we were told by someone from the city, who flies in by helicopter. It's a truly wild and beautiful location, looking across to Jura. Kilharrow Parish Church, seen here, overlooks the island's capital, Bowmore. The church was built round so that the devil couldn't lurk in the corners. Bowmore has all the usual shops, restaurants and hotels. Its distillery, opened in 1779, is the oldest continuously operating on the island. Across Loch Indal from Bowmore lies the attractive village of Port Charlotte. The village was built around the defunct Loch Indal distillery, parts of which are now used as the Youth Hostel and Wildlife Centre. During 1813, an American privateer, polite name for pirate, besieged the port, capturing 6 of the ships lying in the bay. Port Helen, seen here, is the largest town on the island and the second Calmac ferry terminal. A 2-hour sail from the mainland. A busy port, it boasts a number of shops, pubs and restaurants. Its distillery was mothballed in 1983, but the large maltings produces for most of the other distilleries on the island. On the other side of the bay from Port Ellen is Corryvreckan Lighthouse, unusually square. A short walk from here goes along the coast and leads to the lonely beach at Singing Sands. This is Swan's Pool, a tiny sheltered harbour used by local fishermen. It lies a short 5 minutes walk across the Ard from Port Ellen. Behind the white boat on the left is Lefroy Distillery, one of 3 along this coast. This one is Ardbeg, the other one being Lagavulin. All have popular visitor centres, and over the years we have visited all 3. From Ardbeg, a single track road leads for 6 kilometres through native woodland to Kildalton Chapel and the world famous Kildalton Cross. Estimated to have been carved in the 8th century, it's considered the finest example of a Celtic cross in Europe. A further 3 kilometres leads round to Isla's west coast and Claggan Bay, with these next 2 shots taken on consecutive days. A long walk from the farm here leads up the coast to Bothy at Proeg and on to MacArthur's Head Lighthouse. Returning to Port Ascaig, from where this ferry makes the short journey to Phelan on the Isle of Jura. One of the few ferries in the Isles not run by Calmac. When this shot was taken back in 1994, it was run by Western Ferries, but it is now operated by Argyll and Bute Council, with a much more modern craft. On our last trip on the Sound of Gear, the hydraulics on the front ramp kept it from dropping into the water just long enough for the ferry to make the crossing. Quite scary in the fast-running Sound. This is the Paps of Jura seen from Bunnahaven, also taken back in the 1990s on a Mamaea 645 with Fuji Velvia. This is the wreck of the Wyre Majestic, which struck the rocks near Rouval Lighthouse on the 20th of October 1974, ending up here. Apparently drink was one of the primary causes of its demise. Today there is very little left of the wreck. I worked for Wyre Trawlers just prior to the accident, costing repairs to the damage done to trawlers returning from Iceland. Costing this one up would have been a major project. Over onto Jura itself, with this image looking down Glenbatrick to Jura's wild west coast. Perhaps one of the wildest of Scotland's islands, Jura is 142 square miles of hill and blanket bog. With just 25 miles of road running up its east side, Jura's population peaked in 1755 at 1,097. But by 2011 this was down to just 196. Main settlement on the island is at Craighouse, where Jura's famous distillery is situated. Another of its claims to fame is that George Orwell wrote 1984 while staying at Barnhill on the north of the island. This shot was taken looking north along the spine of Jura from Ben Shanty, or Holy Mountain. At 2,496 foot, it's the second highest of the Paps of Jura. It's just 4 foot short of reaching Corbett status. The 3 Paps plus their lower neighbours are the course of the famous Paps of Jura fell race. Very rough underfoot, the hills are mostly made up of loose blocks of quartzite of all shapes and sizes. Strangely though, from afar, all hills look like cones, but as can be seen here, there's a pronounced spiral ridge on it. Back on the mainland and a few more miles along the A83 takes us to the busy harbour of Tarbert. Tarbert roughly translates from Gaelic as carrying across, which refers to a narrow isthmus or neck of land over which boats were carried to Westlock Tarbert. The port is famous for both its seafood festival and the Scottish series of yacht races, second only to the Cows weekend. Another shot of the harbour, this time looking the other way. Back along the west coast, a narrow one-track road alternates between hugging the coast and twisting through native oak woodlands. The road here lies under the trees on the skyline. Note the squall over the Paps of Jura on the left. A few miles further up this narrow road lies the Kilberry Inn, a well-known restaurant with rooms and one of our favourite overnight stops. Also of interest is Kilberry Castle. Another shot I've included, maybe just because I like it, but this is a burial ground near Kilberry. The narrow road swings back to join the A83 just south of Ardrishaig on Loch Fyne. At 40 miles, Loch Fyne is the longest of Scotland's sea lochs. This shot was taken early one morning. As was the next one at Inverary, the county town of Argyll and Bute, an ancestral home of the Duke of Argyll. Back at Ardrishaig, pronounced correctly this time, on the eastern end of the Crinan Canal. Completed in 1801, the 9-mile-long canal has 15 locks, 1 retractable and 6 swing bridges, and was built to connect Glasgow and the industry along the Clyde with the west coast, without the need for the long trip round the exposed Mull of Kintyre. Today the canal is a popular route for pleasure sailors, with nearly 2,000 boats a year passing through it. Also taken along the canal, the canal ends at Crinan itself at the Crinan Basin before it enters the Sound of Jura. Continuing north, the A816 returns to the sea at Loch Craiginnish and the thriving community of Ardfern, from where you can take a trip on the motor vessel Sea Leopard, seen here in Loch Craiginnish, before we enter the Linn of Lorne. The reason for the trip is this: the Corryvreckan whirlpool, third largest in the world. It lies in the Gulf of Corryvreckan between the northern tip of Jura and Scarborough. Scarborough is seen in the background. The whirlpool and standing waves are caused by strong tidal race which being forced into the gulf between the two islands and around a giant pinnacle on the sea floor. Waves of nearly 30 foot have been recorded and the noise heard 10 miles away. Many legends and stories about the feature abound. However, the story that the Royal Navy have labelled the sound as unnavigable is false. Little Corryvreckan to the west of Scarborough, also known as the Grey Dogs, however, is. On the other side of the sound, on the northern tip of Jura, is Wreckan's Cave. The cave is in the Bay of Pigs. There were no pigs here when we were, but there was a herd of wild goats eating on the shoreline. Okay, that's as far as the trip goes this time. And next time I hope to travel further north, taking in Mull, Iona, Easdale, Col and Colonsay. Thank you.